What started on the drawing board became a trophy. Engineers at Federal Premium Ammunition designed the trophy-bonded tip bullet to deliver devastating, bone-crushing performance. With a translucent polymer tip and boat tail design, Trophy Tip provides flatter trajectories and improved accuracy. Plus, a solid copper shank jacket and bonded core mean high weight retention and deep penetration. Trophy Bonded Tip from Federal Premium Ammunition. Claim your trophy.
From the Deer and Deer Hunting headquarters here in Iola, Wisconsin, welcome to Deer Talk Now, our 100th episode. We're very proud to have you with us today. I'm Dan Schmidt, along with Brad Rucks. Brad, we made it 100 episodes. How about that?
I cannot believe it. I mean, many memorable events, too. We had some great guests.
It's really been amazing. I mean, we started in 2012, and it was going to be every week. Well, we missed a few weeks in there. And now we're sitting here, and you know, it's a fun way to break up the day, especially lately, to take all these questions from viewers and things like that. But we were just talking before we went on air here a few of our favorite moments. What's maybe a couple of the things that stick out in your mind?
You know, the one that's probably most memorable for me was Donald Trump Jr. when he was on. I mean, he was just a normal guy, like, you know, just a normal hunter. And when he was on the phone, he really communicated like that. Like, you know, I just want to get out there. I want to harvest something. I'm going to have, you know, a great time in the woods. But, you know, we had a lot of special guests as well, you know, and the guys all love it. Drury loved it. Lakoski loved it. All of them really enjoy interacting with, you know, other hunters from the field.
It's really cool, and especially when we've had those special guests, Ted Nugent and Nicole McLean and Brittany Glaze, and you've seen some of these people. Those two in particular, we interviewed them before anybody really knew who they were. Well, now Brittany's hosting Destination Whitetail on Sportsman's Channel. Nicole's doing her own thing. It's pretty cool to see some of this transformation going on, especially bringing more people into the deer hunting community. I've had a lot of fun doing it, and we have a really good show in store for you today. And you've told us what you want, and basically it's your questions. You've been feeding them to us on Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and Google Plus and sending them to my emails. So we're going to get to a lot of those today. You know, a couple of the things that, one of the things that I remember, I think one of the big ones was the king buck. When we had Jay Fish in here, and we were looking at the rack, and just to see a 200 and almost 20-inch typical whitetail rack. It was sitting on this table, a historic deer for all of deer hunting history.
The pictures just didn't do that thing justice, because you looked at it in the magazine and other spots, and when you got that rack in your hands, it was unbelievable how big that was. You know, it's just a huge, even Real Deal Mineral, Matt's buck.
Oh,
what
absolutely.
Was that from last year?
That was almost a 200-inch deer too.
That thing, I'm just looking at it as like, oh my gosh, I just want to harvest one of these deer myself.
Oh, it really gets you pumped up, and I wish everybody could have been sitting here at the table with us to see that. But Brad, we have a ton of questions we want to get through today. A bunch came in this morning. I'm just going to wrap them out like we normally do, and we're just going to go round robin here trying to answer some of these. Like I said, a lot of these came in off of Facebook today. We're going to post the answers up there, but also just if we read your question, you're going to get a prize package from Deer and Deer Hunting. Shoot us a note, shoot us an IM on Facebook. We're going to get it out to you. It's going to be a whitetail wall rut calendar and a page-a-day calendar for your office, for the home, whatever. It's a really cool thing to have. So let's get to some of these, Brad. Some of them I think are slam dunks. Some of them are going to take a little bit of thought on both of our parts, but the first one that came through was about ozone and ozone generators. And when we talk about ozone generators, mostly it's Ozonics. I mean, it's a brand that's out there. Basically, we've both used it. But the reader or listener wants to know, do ozone generators work? And if so, how do they work? And I thought that was a really good question. I know we both used them, and I'll let you start with it.
Yeah, you know, even before anybody else had really heard of it, there was a company out there called Moxie that had like a unit. It was more for not in the field, it was for in your closets or to stuff in. And I can remember the first time they tested that, you know, we were at a bow hunting roundtable event that one of the agencies puts on, and they asked for a volunteer to go up there, and literally they had, you know, doe in heat lure and dumped it on my hand, and I'm like, oh no, you know, this thing's never going to come off. And they wiped it off dry and said, put your hand over the unit, and you put it over there. He goes, now smell it. I'm like, oh. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely in shock. It was totally gone. And then you're thinking, oh, it's going to come back. 2 hours later, it was still gone. I mean, it had definitely killed all that bacteria. And that's how they work. They actually, the molecules attach to bacteria and make them neutral, which takes away all the scent. So does it work? I'm a believer in it. And anything that I can use to eliminate human scent. And really the light bulb went on for me as late season, we're hunting out of a ground blind, trying to do some doe management. Wind's totally wrong. My 10-year-old says, Dad, let's go out and hunt. You know, I don't want to disappoint him because he's fired up to go and he wants to see me shoot a doe. And we set the ground blind is, you know, sitting there and the wind is blowing right towards these deer. And I'm just sitting there going, well, it's so cold. I'm going to bring Mr. Heater with us. And we had the Mr. Heater going. So that smells as well. And watching these deer starting to come out, I was like, no, any minute they're going to smell us. Any minute they're going to smell us. And next thing you know, they're eating. And it's just not 1 or 2. I'm talking 25, 30 deer are eating perfectly downwind with the wind blowing right to them. Tons of mature does, never picked up their heads. And I'm like, wow, this thing works.
It's my experience exactly. And I actually had to write it down because I couldn't remember the science on how this works. Basically, it was one of those products that I just took it and on faith, and I said, I'm going to try this thing. Wyoming last year, I shot a nice buck with it, and that deer was directly downwind. And I guess the best way, like when I describe it to people, and I think you agree, is that smell is almost like a chlorine type. It's like you're almost like at the pool. It's like a chlorine type, but it's generating ozone. Like Brad said, those molecules they temporarily break into an O3 molecule. And then it's going to convert back. It just does. It's natural, and it'll attach to other molecules, and it attaches to a scent molecule, and that's how these things work. They do work. They're not 100% foolproof. I've had deer come in a little jittery, but the way I describe that is almost like activated carbon. When I first used activated carbon, was the deer that do sense you, which aren't very many. They sense something that might have been there hours ago. And if you know deer behavior, that's how deer react to a scent that might have been out there for several hours. They kind of, and they might scoot on their way, not alarmed. But I'm a big believer in them. It's unbelievable how you can hunt with an ozone generator and have deer directly downwind of you and not get busted.
I think some of those deer that are coming through like that freak out a little bit because, you know, as they're walking through the woods, just think about this, you're smelling all kinds of natural smells in the woods, and all of a sudden you hit this ozone stream and it's eliminated that scent, and that's just, for a whitetail, it's got to just be a shock.
But it's not like a human. You know what it's like when they get a whiff of human odor.
Oh yeah.
They're gone. And it only takes one little speck.
And a lot of times you'll see them get jittery for a moment and relax. Some will get jittery and turn around and just slowly walk out, but he's still giving you an opportunity to shoot. And other ones don't even pick up their head. They just keep coming.
Two things that I'm big on, whether or not I worked in this industry or not, would be activated carbon and ozone generators. And there's everything else. Like you said, do you have to do it all? No, you don't. But as serious bow hunters, we try to get every advantage that we can. I'd say if you haven't tried it, try it for yourself and you decide. But I think that if you do try it, you're going to be very impressed with it. That's a great question that came in. Let's keep going, Brad. We got, I don't know if we're going to get to all of these, but we're going to get to as many as we can. This one I think we've had before, but it was actually asked 3 times this week, so I figured, well, bow season's not that far away, a little month and a half in some places, a month in some other places. Should I shoot does early? And that came in basically for archery season. Archery season's opening up. We both have our opinions on that. Again, I'll ask you first, Brad. Do you shoot your does early or you tend to wait?
Shoot them both. You know, I think a lot of happens with your deer density. If you're in a area that is a high deer density and you really have to manage them and get rid of some of those numbers, I don't think there's a bad time to harvest them. Now, there is a bad spot to harvest them. So we always like to try to take our does out closer to that edge where, you know, they're going to expire. I don't have to bust up their bedding area. You know, if we're going a little bit deeper, say we pattern a larger buck and he's hitting one of our little hidden food plots, you know, just kind of a kill plot is what we call it. I'm not going to shoot a doe in those kill plots. I'm not going to ruin that spot. I want that thing totally unobstructed with human scent. You know, if we're going to hunt it, we're hunting on the edge. If I can go out in those big ag fields where they're coming off, feeding on alfalfa, corn, soybeans, whatever it is, and they're coming down off the edge, I'm going to try to take one out in the morning, right when they're coming back, and shoot her, and hopefully she expires quickly and get her out of there.
That's a good, actually a good tip is early season bow hunting. If you have a spot where you can kill a doe early in the morning, I 100% agree, because most of your early season bow hunting for bucks is going to be in the afternoon. And like you said, you don't want that deer running off into the bedding area, because that first week to 10 to 14 days, if you are a buck hunter and you want to try to get a trophy, that is the best time to do it. And then you're going to be waiting for a while if you don't get it done. The other thing that I would throw in there, and you know that I have not met a doe that I don't want to shoot, and everybody knows that if they know me. But one thing that I would suggest is if you're going to take does off your property early, I would recommend, and it's something I've learned over the years, it took me a while, is I try, and I'm never good at this, try not to shoot the big mature ones right away. If you can hold off until after the rut to shoot the big mature ones, which is very difficult because they're really hard to kill to begin with. I think a big mature doe is a lot harder to kill than a big mature buck a lot of times. But if you can get a yearling doe, which those are really easy to pattern, you can fill your freezer right now. I mean, basically, get that 1.5-year-old doe. She might not even have fawns yet. Nice 90-pound, 100-pound deer up here. Other places not so much, but you could shoot 1, 2, 3 of those right away and have some great venison, and you kind of get that edge off, especially during bow season. Great question. Next one, Brad. Why, you know this because you're the archery geek, why are so many bow hunters switching to arrows with short vanes these days?
You know, the whole point of the short vanes is they're less weight. And they're a little bit, if you ever compare two arrows from the traditional 4-inch, I'm assuming is what the guy probably ever shot. If you compare those, the 2 inches have a higher profile. And the theory there is that they collect the air a little bit better and they stabilize quickly. In my opinion, they both stabilize well. I don't care which arrow you shoot. And really, I mean, it's personal preference. But I have noticed with the Blazers, it seems like they spin well. If you do put any kind of helico on and you're shooting in the smaller diameter shafts, it's much easier to get a helico on a 2-inch vane than it is the longer ones on the small diameter shafts. It's all about stabilization and that focal point in your arrow. You do want the weight on the front of the arrow, so the less weight you have on the back, it's going to be a little bit heavier. Again, it's going to stabilize quicker, and that's the theory on it.
That's a big thing, especially like you said, those shorter diameter shafts. It's really difficult. I mean, back in the day we shot, I think they were almost those 5-inch.
5.5.
And that you can't do that today. Not if you're shooting the modern equipment. You kind of got to go with what's.
And you and I grew up through it. I mean, it was, you had to shoot that. You had to shoot that. And even we went through the feathers versus vanes, and feathers were so much more forgiving because you really didn't have to worry about rest contact or any of that stuff. And then we switched to vanes, and they were better. And then they came out with the little Blazers and started shooting those, and I didn't think they were going to work. And now
That's a good point you bring up about arrow rest, because a lot of people are shooting some kind of drop away now, and you want to have that arrow off of that rest and no possible contact. So that's an extra benefit right there.
Yeah.
Great question. Okay, let's take a quick break between questions, and we're going to tell you about the Shop Deer special for today. And Brad, this is a cool thing, and I was going to actually ask you something new you're going to try. This is it, actually. I'm going to give it away. This is the new Hightail field dressing tool. You might have seen it. It's from Viking Solutions. If you don't know Viking Solutions, if you've ever heard of Summit Tree Stands, you're going to know Viking Solutions, because Summit Tree Stands was founded by the Waller family. And John Waller is a great deer hunter from down south, Alabama, and he's basically, his entire family has been all about whitetails and deer hunting throughout the years, a huge deer and deer hunting supporter. But they started a company called Viking Solutions. They have some really cool products, and it's all about making after the hunt easier. This is one, I've used it. I know you haven't, and you're looking forward to it. This is called the Hightail. It's a field dressing tool. Now, do not dismiss this when you see this, because a lot of guys see it and say, oh, I could make one of those myself. No, you can't. I used this last fall. We have it on sale today in the store for $34.95, extraordinarily cheap. I keep this thing, it folds all up in a little pack. I keep it in my truck, and when I shoot a deer, I just go back and get it. You could put it in your backpack. I think that thing folds up into a pack about that big and about yay big around. Essentially what this does is you can put the deer in this, I guess you would call it a cradle apparatus, and very quickly, I mean within seconds, you can tie its legs back and its rump stays up. So for field dressing a buck, a doe, anything, it makes it so much easier. Especially, I have a bad back, believe it or not. The older I get, it's much difficult. I mean, yeah, people say, oh, I can field dress a deer in no time. Well, the older you get, it makes it a little bit more difficult. And this thing is so efficient. You basically, remember the days there was a guy probably in camp that could field dress a deer and just dump the whole thing out and everything comes out nice and clean? That's what you can do with this. This hightail. It's a really cool thing. You got to check it out.
Well, just think how many times you've struggled doing it when you're by yourself, because you're trying to hold both legs back and do all this. This literally does all that for you. And I can remember as a kid, when we went hunting, and my dad was field dressing a deer, my job was to hold the legs apart. Yeah. That was my job. Well, now, you don't have to have that.
Even one guy asked on Facebook, he said, well, what if the deer is stiff already? Well, that does happen. I've done it. I did 5 deer with this thing last year, and I will not, unless I forget the thing somewhere, I will not do it again without it. It makes it that much easier. Just check it out. It's a really cool tool. It's on sale. It's $34. It is a very, very worthwhile product. I endorse it 100%. But that's called the Hightail from Viking Solutions right now at Shop Deer Hunting. Brad, let's get back to some questions. The next one comes along the same lines as gear, and this viewer wanted to know what time of day right now in July, what time of the day should he check his trail cameras, and how often should he be checking his trail cameras leading up to bow season?
For time of day, I like midday because the deer aren't on their feet this time of year. If you look at, your camera activity, it'll pretty much tell you when the deer are on that camera. And it's going to be early morning, everything from 4:30 to maybe 7:30 in the morning. And then it picks back up earlier in the afternoon. If it's cool, maybe 3 o'clock. So anytime in that window, the biggest thing on frequency is how easy access do you have your trail camera? If say it's in a fence gap along a farm field, I mean, yeah, you can drive your truck down there and pick it up. You could do it daily if you wanted to. It's literally, where's your camera placed? Right now, if you can place minerals out there legally, it's a great spot to have your camera. If you can bait, and I know guys where you can actually feed the deer, we'll put it in an alfalfa field, and one well-known hunter told me he can have inventory if he does that for a month of every buck on his farm, and it's like 800 acres that he's monitoring. And he swears by it. He said he'll have every buck that's on his farm in that bait pile sometime within that month. So for me, I like those low, kind of low access points. I have one spot that literally funnels in off the ag fields, and then we got a clover path that goes into more clover and other fields. We have a camera there. We can drive up to it with an ATV, pull it out. We'll do that during the midday. And most of mine are all easy access right now. I'm not so far about going in deep because those bucks are coming out early. I mean, this time of year, I love to drive around at night, right at dusk, with spotting scope on the window and just see what's out there.
It's that, that's some great points, especially when you're talking about hunting agriculture areas, places with food plots, and I'll just take the other side of this. What about if you're hunting in a spot, like you said, if it's just woods or you don't have access to these things? You got to be real careful with that, because as cool as it is to get a photo, you can educate those deer in a hurry, especially the bucks that you're hunting. And what I would recommend, same thing Brad says, is going in middle of the day, but really limiting that. And it's frustrating because you're excited, you want to get photos, but I would say once a week, especially if you're hunting pressured areas, middle of the day, in a place where you can get to. I do not put them next to tree stands. That's one thing I always say. If you have traditional spots where you're hunting, I don't put them there before the season.
Yeah.
Because that's just, it's pointless. It's asking for deer to say, yes, there's a person coming in here, or to knowing that a person's coming in there, and now you're introducing scent. No matter how hard you try, we can preach it till we're blue in the face. Yeah, you got to act like you're hunting, and we don't. We go in there with blue jeans on, we go in there with hiking boots on, and you're leaving scent all over the place, especially with all the vegetation. So I would be just real careful. Not like you're walking on eggshells, but just real smart about it. Not so many trips, and when you do it, either middle of the day, or I've actually retrieve mine in the middle of the night sometimes. If it's 10, 11 o'clock and I happen to be driving through that area and I have an easy spot where I can go grab a card, I'll do that.
And that's a good point. Once the season hits, if you're already full camoed up, you're pretty much sand free. If you got cameras on your way out or way in, and it doesn't really, if you're not going to booger up where you want to hunt, that is a great time to get your SD cards out as well.
It's a good question because a lot of people either don't know or they forget about it, and then they wonder by the time September, even October 1st rolls around, why are these deer quote unquote nocturnal? Well, because you were in there a lot.
You've been hunting them for a month and a half.
There's a question that kind of leads with this one, and this one came in right before we got in the studio, and I'm actually going to pull this up. This comes from Nick Otto. Nick off of Facebook. Thanks for he kind of similar. He's hunting farmlands and woodlands that border public land. He said he's been a bit busy this summer on that private land, food plots, clearing, shooting lanes, logging trails, etc. His question, with all my activity, midday and early afternoon, on that land, has he put a dangerous amount of pressure on those deer? I wouldn't say a dangerous amount of pressure, because if you're hunting private land next to public land, those deer are used to pressure. But like I said, you got to be very judicious on how you do it. Like I always tell people, not like you're walking on eggshells, but fringe hours of the day right now are the worst times to be out there. First light, last light. You don't want to be driving through that field or checking your food plot at, well, nowadays it would be 7 o'clock or later at night. You just don't want to do that. That would be putting a lot of pressure on. Are you going to spook all those deer off that land? No, they're not. A deer's home range is its home range. A buck's core area is his core area. So if that's part of his area, he's going to be there. You just might not see him if you keep running out there at the wrong times. So it's another thing to keep in mind. Public land deer do get pressured. They're used to pressure. However, they know where the safe zones are really, really quickly.
Yeah, and if you're working on food plots, I'm to the impression where if you're on a tractor, you could get away with murder because they're so used to seeing them in those ag fields. And even if you have your food plots a little bit closer to the security cover or even right off the bedding area, we have one that's kind of a long, skinny hourglass shape, and we have that thing literally probably within 100 yards of the bedding area. I mowed that food plot, and we happened to have a camera down there. And when we went back down there a week later to work it up, the deer were in that food plot 30 minutes after the tractor left. So, they heard the tractor. They weren't afraid of the tractor. We weren't walking around all over the food plot, so we didn't leave a lot of scent. We left the tractor scent, the diesel smell, and they're so used to that, it didn't bother them at all.
Yeah, some good tips there. We got one more question. But before we get to that question, one more just brief mention for shop deer that I forgot about was also in shop deer, okay, we told you about the high-tail field dressing tool. Another thing on there, which is, it's kind of like the Cadillac pulling your deer out, is this game extractor. You might have seen them. Another thing that you look at it, you kind of might scratch your head and say, what's this all about? Game extractor is basically, it's aluminum, piece of aluminum welded material. We ship it, it's not that heavy and it's not that big, but you can put this on the back of your ATV. The video you're going to see here, I would say it's not real indicative of what you could use this for, because you see a guy dragging out a buck with an ATV, which is a UTV, which people say, why don't you just throw that deer in the back of a UTV? Well, if you're older, you might not be able to do that. But this thing, I think, is perfect for deer camps, and especially camps where you're shooting a bunch of does. If you're shooting 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 does off of a property in a year, this thing is real easy to get them out of some nasty spots, and especially with a regular ATV.
It mounts to your receiver hitch, so as long as you have that 2-inch receiver, it's going to slide right in there. You pin it. You don't have to lift the deer up at all.
You don't have to lift it up at all. And people say, oh, you're going to drag all the hair off the deer. No, you're not. You're going to do that dragging a deer out. It's a really cool little item here. We have them on sale at Shop Deer, and again, anything you buy off of Shop Deer, if you've seen it on Deer Talk, you just put Deer Talk in the checkout box, and you get an extra 10% off, which is pretty cool, which is actually going to cover your shipping and everything else. But check that out. It's called the Game Extractor at Shop Deer. Forgot to mention that one before. Last question for today, Brad. Another one. I don't know how we picked all these right up your alley, because they're all archery ones. People must be out shooting their bows. By the way, I shot my new bow the other night. My goodness, that new Chill. I'm sorry, the new Creed from Matthews is unbelievably quiet and small. It's the Creed XS. Whew. It's a very cool bow, but I don't need to go into that. It's not me, it's the equipment. And speaking of equipment, the last question somebody wanted to know was they've been having trouble. They shot, basically, long story short, they've shot traditional style broadheads. Now, whether that would be like a Muzzy 3-blade replaceable, I don't know, or if it's a cut-on contact. I'm not sure about that, but they said traditional style broadheads all the way up until now. They want to know, leading into bow season, they've heard so many things about expandables. Should he switch to an expandable? Pros and cons.
You know, it's literally what are you comfortable with, because you can't go wrong. I mean, it's all about shot placement, and you know, people rip on the expandables, and a lot of times it'll hit the shoulder, or, man, there's no guarantee no matter what broadhead you use, if you hit the wrong spot, it might break, it may not perform. I mean, it's all about shot placement. Do you have to fear expandables that they're gonna fail? I haven't had one fail yet. I've had several deer that I shot poorly that expired quicker than they would have with a fixed blade. But I've shot multiple, I mean, how many deer have you killed with your fixed blade as well?
A lot.
I mean, think about that.
And for longest time, now this is going back years ago, but longest time I didn't shoot them. I shoot them now almost exclusively. I love them. But what you said is the key point that everybody forgets. And we see this every year. It's almost like a broken record in the fact that shot a deer, didn't get the deer, had to be the broadhead. They blame the broadhead first and foremost. Shot placement, number one. If you hit a deer in the shoulder with no matter what, if you're shooting a bare razor head, Muzzy, Rage, whatever, you're going to have problems no matter what. I don't care how much weight you're shooting. The one thing that you need to keep in mind when shooting expendables is, you really should be, now they've changed this game a little bit now. We always said 60 pounds minimum draw weight. Well, now they have low kinetic expandable broadheads, which work fabulously. The thing about expandable broadheads, not a cure-all to accuracy. What I like are the big holes. I mean, you can get a 2.5 to 3 inch hole in a deer with a sharp broadhead, and I know manufacturers are not going to want to hear me say this because I've said it before. You got to make sure those broadheads are sharp, and they're not all sharp out of the box. I use a little Smith sharpener to touch up the blades on all my broadheads. Some people say I'm crazy for doing that. It works for me. And I just make sure they're sharp. And if you have a sharp broadhead and you put it in the right spot, you're going to kill a lot of deer. And there's a ton of great broadheads. You have Rage broadheads, you have New Archery Products broadheads, you got Muzzies, you got the new Toxics. You've got so many cool broadheads out there that you can try. It's all about personal preference. So find one that you think is going to work for you, and if it works for you, don't change it. And basically, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But I don't know how many times we can show the shot simulator and show people where to aim. You have to put that broadhead in the right spot.
The other thing is you should, no matter what you shoot, the thing about expandables, why a lot of people like them, is they don't paper tune their bow. So therefore that arrow is not coming out perfectly straight, and there it's going to have a little wobble, a little kick. Well, if that arrow with an expandable happens to kick when it's going to go in, that's why you get some of that funky penetration where it's going to be weird.
Especially on the shot angle.
Yeah, and then you multiply that with a shot angle. If you're shooting fixed blade, you definitely want to test them to make sure they're hitting where your field tips are. If you're shooting expandables. Now, the thing is, everybody says paper tune with a fixed. No, paper tune with both, because I don't want my arrow whipping at all, because you're losing.
If you're going to be going back and forth, right?
You're losing energy. So you want to keep as much energy on that arrow shaft as possible, and then you're going to have better flight.
Yeah, and that's another key point. I don't know how many times that's been written about or talked about or shown on television, that you have to have your bow tuned. But how many of us just get that bow and just move the sight pin, shooting to the left? I'm going to move to make it fit, and now I'm hitting it where it's supposed to go, so I should be fine.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no, and you really find out when that deer is at a funky angle. If he's quartering really hard away, hopefully. I mean, you're not going to hopefully shoot a quartering 2 shot in any situation, but that's what can happen. But it can happen with anything. So
yeah,
it's a good question and something to keep in mind. But I really like them. I really like expandables just for the fact that they are. I think they're easier to tune. I mean, easier to keep my bow shooting, and I can just. But if you're meticulous and you do it, you can still do it with a fixed blade broadhead.
In a large hole, like you said, the blood trails are just insane.
The big thing.
I mean, for me, I love the blood. Now you mentioned the low kinetic energies. My boys are both going to hunt this year, and I still have them shooting fixed just because a little less, weight needed for better penetration, and And honestly, I'm not as confident about shot placement
Yep.
as
I agree with you 100%. I personally would say anybody who's shooting, well, here we can shoot 30 pounds, and I know my wife shot 30 pounds with her bow, but 30, 40, 50 pounds, I'd strongly suggest just starting with a fixed if you haven't been bow hunting for a long time.
Yep.
If you don't have a lot of deer under your belt, there's nothing wrong with that, and that's how we all grew up shooting, and we've killed piles and piles of deer with it, and you're going to be happy with it. So that's it for this week, our 100th episode. Thank you for joining us very much. Join us again next week right here at deeranddeerhunting.com for Deer Talk Now.